Ryan, I have been through hell in the last 12 years. Hell. I have put my family through, myself through literal hell to be where we are at today. And every moment of hell, I had a go from God and a yes from my pastor, and I was fine.
Welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast. I really hope this episode helps you learn and master the skills you need to grow your leadership effectiveness and enjoyment. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to get notified as soon as I post a new session so you don't miss a single episode. I'd also greatly appreciate any reviews, likes, and shares that you can give me. It just helps me extend my reach to more people. So leaders, I know just how frustrating it can feel when you're in the weeds of work or ministry and life is chaotic, you're struggling to feel effective, and you're just not enjoying leadership as much as you could be. And so to help you, after many years of leadership and executive coaching, I've developed a framework called the Christian Leader Blueprint that'll guide you to find clarity in your life and leadership. It'll help you gain a better rhythm of life. It'll help you see yourself more clearly, to leverage your strengths, and you'll produce more productive relationships. It's a step-by-step guide to leadership transformation. And I have that in two formats now. I have a free short guide that you can find on ryanfranklin.org, and I have a book, The Christian Leader Blueprint. And you can find that in any format, including an audiobook, wherever you buy your books. I have a few more things on my website that you may be interested in, so just head on over to ryanfranklin.org and check it all out. And now, let's get to our session. Welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast. On the show today, we have a tremendous guest, Pastor Cortt Chavis. Cortt was born and raised in North Carolina in a ministry-focused home, where he learned the ropes of leadership from his father, who pastored a thriving church for over 30 years. He married his wife, Amanda, in 2000, and together they've worked alongside his father for several years, gaining invaluable experience in church leadership. In 2004, he served in a combat tour in Iraq in the U.S. military. And then in 2006, Cortt felt a call to the evangelistic field, which led him and his family to travel all across the U.S. and internationally, preaching and singing. And then in 2012, he and his wife founded Truth Chapel in Logan'sville, Georgia, where God has done a remarkable work through him in a short period of time, leading to growth and a big community impact. And Cortt is known for his passionate preaching. That's how I met him for the first time, from a distance in the pulpit, and his tremendous singing. And it actually makes me mad when I hear a phenomenal preacher who can just break out in song on spur of the moment, because it's such a tremendous and impactful thing. I'm just kidding about that. I'm happy that he's able to do that. But it's a privilege to have him on the show today. So Cortt, welcome.
Man, what an honor to be here. Thank you so much for all the kind words, and been a fan of your show for quite a while now. So I'm just really, really honored to be here with you today, and hope I can say something to help somebody out there. And again, what a privilege and an honor.
Well, thank you, Cortt. I've admired you from afar. We've talked a few times on occasion, but not in great detail. But I've admired you from afar, from what you have done in the past and what you're still doing and moving into the future as a leader. And also, I just want to say thank you for your service in the military. I know that was likely a very tough season in your life, and
It's an honor.
You did that for us, for your country, and thank you for that. So, you have an interesting background. You're a veteran in the military, as I mentioned. You've assisted your father, who was a pastor. You've done very well in music. You've evangelized for years. All of that, in my opinion, was sort of preparing you for the next season of your life, which was pastoring. Can you share some key moments of your journey that you feel like led you to start your church and to move into that pastoral leadership?
Well, if you've never heard my story about, how the Lord called me into evangelizing, um, I started leading worship very young at the age of like 14 when I was at my dad's church. And then, of course, I kind of grew into, a little bit more in ministry. I wasn't necessarily a preacher per se. I did not really preach. That was my older brother, Brock, and he is a phenomenal preacher, one of my favorite preachers still today. And so I didn't really have that feel in my life of like, I'm going to be a preacher. I knew the Lord had called me. There were very, very significant moments in my childhood and in my early teens where I really felt the call of God in my life. But I really felt like that was for music and that God was going to use me in that facet, in that calling, in that gifting. However, probably around the time that, probably the first year of marriage, when me and Amanda first got married, I had spent a little time outside the church. I kind of, backslid, for lack of a better word, and spent a little time just kind of doing my own thing, and went to college, secular college, and just was being wild. And I really came back to the Lord. And when I did come back to God, I really had a focus on His Word. I was really focused on what I believed. Growing up in the church, it was really like my dad's religion, my grandfather's religion, which I loved them, I respected them, but I was like, it's more like theirs. When I came back to the Lord and I really dedicated my life to to church and to God, I was like, I don't really know the Word. I don't really know or know what I believe. And I really took a deep dive into the Word. And it was during this time that I began to feel something in my spirit. I talked to my wife about it. I mentioned it to my father. I went on a fast. I was kind of praying like, Lord, I don't know what you're doing, but I feel that there's something else for me. I was working a job, I worked at an oil company. I was, just a regular everyday guy who sang at church. I was a worship leader at church. And that was my role. That was my job. And I really didn't really feel any other thing other than that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here came this almost like pressure. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, is the Lord calling me to preach? But I don't preach. I'm not a preacher. That's not my role. That's not what I do. And it was just kind of a weird season. Well, when God called me to evangelize, because that's what I was feeling like I should go evangelize. But I was like, man, I don't even preach. Like, what am I going to do? I can go sing. I'm fine with that. And so it was like a random Sunday. Me and Amanda had been praying. I've been fasting. And a prophet, Johnny Garrison, was at our church. And during the middle of his message, he just came over to me. Before he came over to me, I heard someone say, "Go." And it was very audible. It was so audible. I turned around to see who it was. There was no one there. I thought, that was weird. He stopped preaching, walked over to me, said, "I heard what God said. God told you to go. And when God said it, I heard it." It was a pretty powerful moment for me. It changed my life. I've never been the same since that moment. No matter whatever happens in my life, I will always have that moment and the reality of what happened. And I think that there's a power in remembering the moments. When you remember the moments and you're in the middle of some junk in life, or you're questioning your calling, or you're questioning your gifting, or you're questioning what God has for you to do, remembering those moments and being like, you know what, that really happened. And I went through a season about 6 years or so, maybe about 5 years, where I was really confused because my father was like, well, we'll pray about it. We'll see. He was very wise. I didn't see that then. I see it now. But he told me no. He told me no for years and years and years, a consistent no. And so I had those moments where I would question, like, did that really happen? Was that God? Was that me? Did I eat something bad? And I would even ask my wife, I say, hey, you remember that Sunday this happened? Yeah. And so I was in a place where everything else in my life was bitter to me. It was almost as if I couldn't do that, it was like there was nothing else for me. I was working a job. I was in the military. I was, a weekend warrior in the National Guard. And I loved the military and I loved what I did. I had really no clue that I would ever go overseas. But, and we'll talk a little bit about the military side of things. But really, as I began my evangelistic career after all of that, several years into my evangelistic career, I prayed. And here's what I prayed. I prayed, God, whenever this changes for me, because I think one of the worst things that any of us can do in ministry is beat a dead horse and just continue to do something that's over with. We preach about seasons, but we are terrified of seasons. We sing about seasons, but we're terrified of seasons because a season means that something has to end for something to begin. And I didn't want that. And I said, Lord, whenever this season changes for me, here's what I would like. I would like you to put on me what you put on me that Sunday. Because I remember everything else was just bitter to me. Nothing else tasted good. It was like, if I can't do that, I can't do nothing. It's all I talked about. It's all I dreamed about. It's all I prayed about. And then one morning I woke up to go evangelize and it was almost gone. And I struggled with that for a week or two. I was like, what is going on? I don't want to go. I don't want to go get on a plane. I don't want to leave my family. What is happening? I would go to churches. I would fall in love with the people. I would just be like, man, this is a great church, man. You got something really good here. This is amazing. And I would see myself standing in that pulpit as the pastor, pastoring those people. And I was like, God, what is this? And then the Lord reminded me, you told me, if you ever changed, if my calling for you shifted, then this is what you would feel. And I literally said, well, Lord, you got to talk to Amanda because, she's never lived away from home. We live on nice land with her family. I got a pond in my front yard. Life is good. And my evangelistic career is on the way up. It's not on the way down. I'm not trying to find my way. Everything's
So in other words,
great.
You weren't struggling and working multiple jobs trying to make ends meet. This was something that was actually you didn't want to pursue, but you felt God leading you that direction. This was not just looking like it was some mountaintop experience that you were chasing.
Exactly. I questioned myself a million times. Not only me, but other people questioned me. Good friends of mine were like, what are you doing? You can basically write your own ticket. Everybody wants a piece of you. Why are you going to start a church?
Yeah,
and then
you sing phenomenally. You can preach. You can do all of those things.
All of those things. And behind the scenes, what a lot of people don't know is I had been offered a couple churches in my season of evangelizing. Basically, carte blanche, all you got to do is come. And I never felt that. I never felt that at all. The only time that I ever felt good about something, I called my father and I said, Dad, this opportunity's been presented to me. I want to give you the parameters of the opportunity. And I want you to tell me what you think. And he said, where is it? And I told him where it was. And he said, absolutely not. And I said, well, you haven't heard? He said, no. The answer is no. And you got to remember,
wow,
I lived for a little while outside of the umbrella of having a true pastor. And I will never do that again. And so I said, yes, sir. Absolutely. 100%. And my dad always told me no. And I hated that about my dad. But in this level, in my development in ministry, what I begin to understand is, you know what? It doesn't matter how many times he says no. I'm going to say yes, sir, every time. Yes, sir. And I was a little frustrated about that situation. But, 22, 23 years removed, looking back on that, what a a word of wisdom. My life probably would not be what it is today if I would have done that, because it looked good on the outside, but he just didn't feel it in the spirit. He said no. And it was the right answer. It was the right answer. And moments like that. So when I talked to Amanda about what I felt, matter of fact, I didn't even talk to her. I had said, God, you will have to speak to Amanda. And I remember it like it was yesterday. We're driving on the road and she says to me out of the blue, do you think we'll live here forever? Those were her words. And I said, what do you mean? Do we live here forever? And was like, we might move one day, buy some land, whatever. She said, no, I'm not talking about here where we live. I mean, do you think we'll live in North Carolina forever? And I said, why? Why do you ask that question? And then she started crying a little bit. And she said, I feel like God wants us to start a church. And then I started crying. I'm getting choked up now thinking about it. Then I started crying. And I'm like, babe, you're not going to believe what God's been talking to me about. And then she really started crying. And she said, oh, no, it's true. This is true. And I feel it's true. I think she was hoping that I would say, well, that's crazy. We're not going to do that. But I did feel it. So we started talking privately, me and her, praying. We talked about different locations, what we could do. We both really loved Charleston, South Carolina. And we talked about that. We both love San Antonio, Texas, Riverwalk area. We're like, man, a church inside the city limits of San Antonio, that would be amazing. And we both loved Atlanta. And that was kind of, where we ended up. There's a whole bunch of stories behind why we ended up in Atlanta. But when I went to my father, matter of fact, I was so nervous about meeting my father that I told my wife not to come with me. I said, I'm going to go talk to Dad about what I feel. And I was like, I'm going to go alone. I just didn't want the embarrassment or, my dad is he's a no nonsense guy and I love him for that. But sometimes, I want a conversation. I want some dialogue. I mean, the man's just a no, yes type guy. And so I went to my mother and father's house. I called a meeting with them. I sat down in their kitchen. We talked for a little while, some sundries. And I said, hey, listen, I called this meeting because I have something really important I need to tell you guys. And I said, I'm just going to come out and say it. Me and Amanda feel like God wants us to go start a church. And literally the first words out of my father's mouth was, yes. He said, yes. He said, wow. This is what I've been waiting for. He said, you and Amanda are going to start a great church. And he just began to pour out his spirit. And I wanted to know where my father was. Who is this man? Who had abducted my father, replaced him with this person. My mom's sitting there. She's just crying, and I'm just having this moment where I'm like, you never appreciate the value of a yes until you've been told no a lot. And that yes, man, it just has so much power. Like I knew sitting in my mother and father's kitchen that day that this church would be a revival church. 100%. I had no doubt in my mind. And that moment was just as powerful for me as the moment on that Sunday morning standing on the front row with Johnny Garrison. Those two moments signify my life in the ministry that God has given me. Because I had a go from God and I had a yes from my pastor, and no devil in hell can ever change that, no matter what. Wow. And Ryan, I have been through hell in the last 12 years. Hell. I have put my family through, myself through literal hell to be where we are at today. And every moment of hell, I had a go from God and a yes from my pastor, and I was fine.
So before we continue on with the podcast, this episode is brought to you by Christian Leader Community Coaching. Are you a Christian leader who is overwhelmed by the complexity of trying to figure out how to grow your team? I want to introduce to you our Christian Leader Community Coaching program. We have an easy-to-use online platform that has a full archive of courses, supportive community, live group coaching, and elements that are customizable specifically for your team. And I've personally seen the quick and enormous impact that it can have on a team of leaders who are focused together on learning and mastering the skills needed to grow their leadership effectiveness and enjoyment. And we want to be a part of that with you. We want to help you create and implement a plan. The community is very much affordable, but I would say that you can't afford not to have focused growth within your team. Your results heavily depend on it. So don't wait any longer. Let's do this together. Go to ryanfranklin.org and join Christian Leader Community Coaching today. I look forward to seeing you and your team inside the community. And now, back to our podcast.
Yeah. I'll roll over, go right to sleep because I got to go from God and a yes from my pastor. And that is the thing that signifies who I am, what I am, and gives me the strength to make it through in those moments where you're just like, man, let's just wrap this up. This isn't going the way we thought it would go.
I can't help but to think, Cortt, I've never heard a church planner say, this is easy. And, for you to sit here and say you went through hell to grow an effective church and still you're a pastor that is going through some tough stuff. If you're a pastor, you're going through tough stuff.
Absolutely.
But I can't help but to think in my mind, the training that you had with your dad, the going out, the evangelistic field, seeing all types of churches and all walks of life. But my mind keeps going to that military experience. How do you feel like that sort of prepared you and impacted your character development and your ability to do these hard things?
The military really changed me. This isn't like too much of a secret because I've really talked about it over the last probably 5-6 years of my life. But when I was really young, I was wounded, family member. And it was a tough season for me. I really feel like I lost my childhood. But what it did is it developed in me anger and just a distrust of authority. I really had authority problems. My mom and dad will contest to that. My Sunday school teachers will contest to that. My school teachers will contest to that.
A little bit of rebelliousness going on there, huh?
I was very rebellious and I was very angry. I felt like my life had been stolen from me. That's what I felt. And, we have to be careful with trauma because what I realized about my trauma is that it became my justification. And trauma is tough, and I don't take it away from anybody. I've been there, I've done that, and I don't wish it on any soul to live through that. No. But if you're not careful, you will shift your trauma into justification. That's what I felt. I feel like I'm justified.
Wow.
I'm justified in my actions, my deeds.
That's a powerful statement. That is a powerful statement.
It really is. Yeah. It really is because that's not only is that what I did, but as a pastor, I see it all the time. That people are using their trauma from childhood or a broken marriage or a tough relationship, whatever it may be, even a lost family member. And they will use that loss, they'll use that trauma as justification for an attitude they have, a spirit that they live with, anger, distrust, and even sin. People will justify sin because, this is what happened to me. And so I have a right. And people don't say that out loud, but they live it out loud. We watch it, on the scene from a pastoral position. I get to see people live out their justifications every day. And while I'm careful not to judge them, I also have to be very honest with them and say, hey, you don't have a right to treat people this way. You don't have a right to act this way. You don't have a right to sin. You don't have a right to live outside the boundaries of the commandments of God because your dad hurt you or your mother treated you a certain way or you lost a family member early on.
I hear you in that moment, giving them grace and also giving them truth and trying to bring them to the truth, the reality that they can't be a victim in that moment.
No, we've all been victims of something. Everybody
Yes.
listening, me and you both, and everybody who will ever listen to this podcast or watch this podcast, you've been a victim of something. Where you
Absolutely.
decide to live, though, is the question. Is really
Exactly.
the question that changes all of our lives. Where do I want to live? Do I want to live inside of this? Would this be my defining moment? And that's what it was for me. I had a huge problem with authority, got in trouble in school, too many to even mention. And then I joined the military. I come out of college. I had wasted all my college money, embarrassed my parents, embarrassed myself, got back in the church, and literally didn't even ask anybody, went to the recruiter and just signed up. And I don't know why, I just felt like I needed it. I felt like I needed something in my life that would help me adjust my mentality. The military really helped me with that. Helped me understand authority. Helped me shut my mouth. Helped me not get the last word in. And it also helped me with leadership. I
helped you to be able to take a no and just tuck it in. Huh?
When they give you a no in the military, that's a no questions no. You can't ask why.
Yeah.
Which was a problem I had. I wanted to know why. Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? Military, you just take it and you live with it. And I didn't realize that I had leadership in me, though. I honestly didn't. I didn't feel like a leader. I felt like I was a follower pretty much my whole life.
You think that was tied to the trauma?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I felt less than. I felt very insecure.
Yeah.
Very insecure. And I could go from happy to angry in, 0.2 seconds. And then I would just justify it, within myself.
But the military sort of pulled some of that out of you, some of the insecurity out of you, gave you a sense of confidence about yourself, I would assume.
It did. The first thing I realized is that I was stronger than I thought I was, mentally and physically.
Yeah.
They break you down and they build you back up. And I went to a combat unit, which I was an M1A1 tanker, M1A1 Abrams. And the school that they do for that is in Fort Knox, Kentucky. Anybody watching or listening, if you've ever been to Fort Knox, I got two words for you: agony and misery. the two mountains that they make you climb almost every day in Kentucky. And it was a rough place. There was no let up. It was 17 weeks of OSET training, one stop unit training. So it wasn't like I did 6 weeks of basic and then I left and went to an AIT where I, had a barracks and I, got evenings off or what, and went to a school. This was 17 weeks of pure hell. And it's like a rite of passage. Like they don't want you to be a tanker. They hate you. They think that you're scum. And if you are going to be a tanker, then you have to, be at this level. One missed question on a test, you would fail. They would fail you. They wanted 100% from everybody. We had like 100 and something join, and we graduated 80. 80 of us graduated. And it was just a lot of pressure. But in the pressure, I kind of felt something in me start rising. Almost immediately, they made me platoon leader. So, they break you up in like 3 platoons, and they made me platoon leader. And it was really just because I would get the job done. I could develop teams. That was one thing that my drill sergeant told me, that I was good at developing teams. I was good at just putting people in charge of something and making it happen. Just making the decisions. Okay, you and you and you, you're over this, you and you and you, you're over that. Let's make it happen. Let's get it done. And I never really felt that way. I never really felt like I had that kind of leadership. But I went in 17 weeks, I went from a private E to, I jumped 3 ranks in basic, which is not really that, it's kind of unheard of that I would jump 3 in 17 weeks. I jumped to E2 because of my time in already. And then I met a board and got PFC almost, immediately. And man, that gave me so much confidence. It gave me so much confidence that I graduated with honors. was top of the class. And I loved it. I loved blowing stuff up. I loved being in that big machine, and throughout, even when I was in the National Guard. So when I got back stateside, I started going to guard unit stuff. I was flabbergasted. This is unorganized. What are we doing? Like we go to drill and go to Waffle House and just eat all day. And I'm like, what? This is not military. I had that military mindset. I wanted to be doing something. Well, 9/11 happened. When 9/11 happened, it shifted everything. We got a lot more serious, started really, what we would call militarizing. You got a lot of guys, they're just there once a weekend. They're not working out. They're not taking care of their bodies. They're not taking care of their skill set. And so I really jumped in. I really got involved. I loved it. I loved to do it. And then me and Amanda we got pregnant. Courtney was 2 weeks old. And we had just come back from a training in California where we were one of the first guard units to beat the OP4, which is the opposing force. We played war for 2 weeks in the desert, and we beat the OP4. What we did, we were all excited about that. It was amazing. We're good and whatever. But what we didn't know is that put us on top of the list to go to Iraq.
Wow.
So we get home. Courtney's two weeks old, and I go to drill on a weekend, and the colonel who was on my tank, when the colonel got off the tank, I was a tank commander. I was just really close with him, just individually, personally. He said, "Hey, we're going to Iraq, and we have a meeting today." And I remember saying, "Nah, I mean, y'all might go to Iraq, but I'm not going to Iraq. Like God, God's not going to do this to me. Like I'm going to be an evangelist. God's moving in my life. Things are happening. And I love what I do stateside, but I didn't really sign up to go to combat." Well, I was wrong. And of course, spent a year in combat in Iraq in 2004, which, was still pretty wild over there during all that time. I didn't take tanks. We didn't take tanks. We took Humvees, and we were ground pounders. We policed cities. We tried to connect with holy men, imam, sheiks, find out where the bad guys are. We're on the Iran border in the Diyala province of Iraq. And our job was to basically police that border. All the weapons and fighters were coming in from Iran. Iran was, basically sending them all over. So our job was to police that piece of land there. And it was pretty wild. Everything you could think of, it was there. We're bombed like 187 times. They dropped mortar rounds into our camp over 180 times. It was
wow.
It really changed me though. It changed me. Again, leadership. And you got to move. You got to communicate well. Everybody has to be on the same sheet of music. There's no room for heroes, and there's no room for individuals. We move as a unit. We accomplish as a unit. We fail as a unit. We win as a unit. You train for all of that in the military, that you train for it. But when it comes down to it, it's just muscle memory. It's just muscle memory. What you train for, what you do over and over and over and over again, stateside, when you get in that combat zone, you don't even think about it. It's just quick reactionary. It's driven into your brain, and it lies dormant until needed. And I learned a lot about myself in Iraq. I learned that I was not fit for what God wanted me to do. I needed to change some things about the way I was thinking, my mindset. I tell people this all the time. I learned in Iraq that God was displeased with me because I was more concerned about the ministry than I was about my personal relationship with Him.
Wow.
And I really came to kind of a crossroads in my life in Iraq, where I realized that God wanted more out of me because he was going to do more with me. And he wanted to use me, but he couldn't use me like that.
Yeah.
And so there's a few things that I gave up on. There's a few things that I changed about my mentality, my mindset. I became very humble in Iraq. And I don't think that I was not humble before, or I had a problem with humility. I just didn't know what true humility looked like. I didn't know what that thing really was. You hear about it, people preach about it, you can have all the examples you want, but until that thing starts birthing in your heart, you don't really know what that looks like or even what that feels like.
Yeah.
And I was at a place where I didn't care. I didn't care if I ever evangelized. I didn't care if I ever preached. I didn't care if no one ever heard any of my music that I had written. I didn't care about anything. All I cared about was being a good saint in the church, being a good husband to my wife, and being a good father to my only child. Those were the things that meant the world to me.
Sounds like it sort of broke you down again. The military training broke you down and built you back up. And then your experience in Iraq just sort of broke you down again to
Absolutely.
Ground floor and building you up again.
Absolutely.
And what, in your opinion, what positive things, positive impacts to your character, maybe some specific things that you feel like grew in that year in Iraq, and then in the years, after that, what do you feel like was truly developed to help you move into that leadership role of a pastor?
I think one of the greatest things it taught me is, even if you have the power to do what you want, do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know how that feels because they've never had the power to do what they want. It's like somebody was telling me one time that they were talking to an elder, and they were talking about someone that had went on a TV show or whatever. And they were like, I can't believe they did, I can't believe they did this. I can't believe they said that, whatever. And the elder told him, said, don't judge them, because you have no idea what you would say if someone gave you the same opportunity. And I feel like one of the things that I learned in Iraq is, even if you have the power to do what you want to do, you have to make the right decision. Doing the right thing is always the right thing. And it doesn't matter if it hurts you. It doesn't matter if it hurts other people. If it's right at the end of the day, you will be happy that you made that decision and not something else.
So, if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of steer this down that rabbit hole of decision making.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge part of leadership, and obviously that was a big part of what you learned, throughout the military, throughout your experiences in early adulthood, was decision making. That was a big impression upon you, and it appears that you've been really good at decision making and has produced really good results in your ministry, especially over the last 14 years. How do you think decision making, whether good or bad, can impact a leader who wants to do something significant in a church or Christian organization, whether it's good or bad? What does decision making do? How can it impact a leader?
When decision making it's one of the unconditional vices of being in leadership. You're going to have to make decisions. There's no way around it. Number one, if you're afraid to make decisions, it's going to be a rough road of leadership because it's unconditional. You're going to have to make decisions. In order to be the leader, you're going to have to make decisions. The worst thing is to find a leader who has maybe the credentials or maybe the position or maybe even the ear of the people, but they struggle to make decisions when decisions need to be made. Because
that
if you
drives
don't,
people crazy.
It drives people insane. But it will also ruin it'll ruin your team. It'll ruin you. It'll ruin your church. It'll ruin your corporation.
Reputation. Yeah.
Yes, you have to make a decision. But I think too that you have to, the parameters of decision making and how you make decisions is the key. How you make decisions. You're going to have to make decisions. This is not a podcast about do I need to make decisions or not. Yes, you do.
Let's go there. What are some good parameters or habits, or what's some good decision making habits?
Good decision making habits, and I'll speak from a pastor's position. I think that this would probably fold over, maybe envelope CEOs, youth pastors, real estate agents, whatever leader is listening to this. I think that some of these things will fold over and help you in some way. Number one, you're going to have to make decisions. So that's not a question. Number one, you need to control the parameters of the decision making. Some decisions are going to be super simple. They're going to be so clear. There's going to be no fog. You're going to have one or two decisions to make, and they're going to be crystal. And you're not going to need these parameters. You're going to, very simple. Everybody's on board. This makes sense. It's the way to go. You have those moments. Those moments are great, but you are going to have moments where you have to make a decision that's going to affect the entire, the entire church, the entire industry, whatever it may be. Everybody's going to be affected by this. All the leaders are going to be affected. You're going to be affected. And you have to make this decision. The first thing is you can't make the decision in a bubble. You cannot make the decision just without any kind of outside parameters. And I will say that these are the outside parameters. Number one is God. Mm-hmm. If you're faced with a tough decision, you have to pray about that. But you have to pray specifically. Here's one of the things that we struggle with as leaders. And honestly, Ryan, we struggle as Christians. We don't know how to pray. We're super, super spiritualized. We are very undereducated. And when we pray, we just pray willy-nilly. And there's a biblical way to pray. And there's also a lot of parameters in that biblical context that help us with prayer. James says this. James says that if a man wants wisdom, that he can ask God, and God will liberally give him wisdom. That's a promise in your Bible. However, I see people praying for outcome and not praying for wisdom. There's a difference between praying for outcome and praying for wisdom. Because if you get wisdom, what you might find is the outcome that you desired so greatly is the worst possible outcome. And it's not good for you, not good for the team, not good for the church, not good for the future, not good for your destiny, your calling, your purpose. Wisdom is so powerful because we can have all the knowledge in the world. I love to read. I listen to podcasts. I'm always cramming my brain with knowledge. However, that knowledge means nothing if I don't have wisdom. So I always pray for wisdom. I pray that God will give me wisdom. And when I'm faced with decision making, I can't make this thing alone. So the parameters of who I'm going to involve in this decision making, number one, has to be God. I have to talk to God. I got to ask God, here's the parameters of the situation. Here's the details. When I pray, I'm very specific about my prayer. I don't just pray, Lord, work this out. But what does that mean? Would you go to your lawyer and say, hey, man, work this out? No, he's going to want details. Give me some emails. Give me some text messages. Show me what happened. Is there a video I can watch? Details. So when I'm praying, I'm saying, God, here's the details. Here's what the prayer is about. Here's what the situation is. These people are involved. This situation is what it is. Lord, I need wisdom on this situation.
Also, I see that doing two things. I see that, you're engaging God in the situation and getting his input on it, but you're also, in order to give him details, you're having to flesh it out yourself in your mind. It's bringing clarity. It's putting all the pieces to the puzzle on the table and bringing clarity in your mind as you're getting ready to hear from him. And he gives us a mind, and he gives us wisdom. And he wants us to make good decisions ourselves as well. So I see it doing two things for you.
If we were to go to a therapist and we're to say, hey, I got this big decision to make, the therapist is going to say, oh, okay, cool. Give me the details. And we're going to tell the therapist everything. And then the therapist is not going to give us any advice. Here's what the therapist is going to do. They're going to say, well, how does that make you feel? Okay. Well, what do you think about that? And we're going to pay them $200 to get us to flesh out the details. Because when you hear yourself say it, something happens. This is what prayer is. This is why Isaiah called him the wonderful counselor. And we really harp on the mighty God, the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, but we fail to recognize that one portion where he's the wonderful counselor. And he's my counselor. So I'm going to ask him first. I want wisdom in this situation. And here's the situation. And there's a great book that I read many years ago, and I still refer to it. Cy Wakeman, C.Y. Wakeman, wrote a book called No Ego. And she has a podcast called Reality-Based Leadership. And I listen to it quite a bit as well. And she says, there's three things when you're making a decision, or there's a situation and you need answers, or you feel like you need a resolution. The first thing is the facts. What are the facts? I think prayer sometimes is a place where we can flesh out the facts because no one's listening but God. And I can tell God anything. Yeah. I can tell God that I don't like that person. I can tell God that they're a jerk. I can tell God that I want to slap them. I can tell God anything. And if you think that that's crazy, then don't read the book of Psalms, because David did this all the time. In Psalms 109, David actually prayed that God would kill a man, make his wife a widow, make his kids beggars. I mean, David was upset, but he took his complaint.
Ironically, I read that this morning.
Yeah, David was pretty mad in that chapter.
Psalms 109. Yeah.
And he was asking God to do some crazy things. But God is the only complaint department that can handle our complaint, especially when our complaint is with somebody. So what are the facts? What are the facts? And then you have to look introspectively. How do I play into this? What is my role in this? All of us could change our lives immediately by being introspective on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. How am I feeling? Where am I at? Where's my head at? What's going on in my life? What am I doing?
Emotional intelligence. Yeah.
Emotional intelligence, relational intelligence. It's life-changing. And really, it's super simple. Just be honest with yourself about how you're feeling, what's your role in this, what did you do, what did you say, how was your attitude?
It's simple in concept, but it's extremely hard for people to get.
Yeah. Well, it's so hard because you got to be honest with yourself, and you got to say, hey, well, this is what I said, but this is the tone that I said it in. And then the third thing that Cy Wakeman says is, what does great look like? And so, like, I'm making a decision as a pastor. My third question to myself is, if I was the greatest pastor in the world, what would I do right now? Like, if they made a magazine about pastors, top 100 pastors in the world, and I was on the cover, what would that guy do? What's crazy is we know the answer to that. The answer to that's already up here. We know how to be great, but we never access that part of it. God has given us greatness inside of us, especially if he's called you to be a minister, a pastor, a preacher, a leader. He's already put that greatness in you. God's not giving you things. He's pulling things out of you. Like, God's not giving you something. He's just developing what's already in you. And it's in there. You know that. But if you never ask yourself the question, then you don't know the answer to that. What if I was the best dad in the world, what would I do in this moment? If I was the best pastor, leader, if I was, if I was just the best friend in the world, what would I do in this situation? And I think that asking ourselves that question is huge. So the first thing is, the first thing you got to do is you got to talk to God. The second thing is, and this is for me, specifically, this is for me, when I can, when it's optional. Sometimes as a pastor, it's not optional, but 90% of the time it's optional for me. I want to talk to my wife about it. And I'll tell you why. Because God has made us one. And there's a part of my brain that doesn't work without her. And if I can flesh this out to my wife and I can get what she thinks about it or even what she feels about it, 100% of the time, I'm probably going to make a better informed decision just hearing what she feels. She's a woman. So she has a whole nother emotional palate that I don't have. I can't taste those things because my palate is male. And there's this decision that I need to make is very versatile. And I just need to see what she says. It doesn't mean I'm going to do exactly what she thinks. It doesn't mean that she controls what's going to happen. I just want to hear that voice. I want to hear that voice. What do you think about this? Because that voice,
I absolutely agree with that. If
trigger something in me that I wasn't even thinking about. Yeah,
exactly. If I have the opportunity to slow down and get my spouse's opinion on a major decision, I need to do that. I'm wise to do that, and so I agree completely with that.
Yeah. Well, God designed her to be a help to me. That's the God design. You can't separate the woman from the design that God genetically made her to be. Spiritually, genetically, she's my help. So if I got something really tough, and I'm like confused at which way to go, I'm going to run that by her. I'm going to say, hey, and there's times as a pastor, and if there's pastors listening, you will agree. There's times that you don't want to tell your wife some stuff. There's just some things I don't want her to know. I want her to be able to come to this church, love on these people, and not know this junk that's going on behind the scenes. And so there are moments where, I'm going to keep that to myself. And in those moments, I will call my father, who is my pastor, and I'll talk to him. And I'll say, Dad, this is one of those situations where I don't really want to talk to Amanda about this. I want her to know. But here's the situation. Here's the parameters. What do you think? I love this because my dad is so no nonsense. In like one sentence, he normally helps me out tremendously. Like he's not a dialogue guy. He's not going to give me a whole book. I talk way more than him. But this man would just be like, well, this and this and this. And I'm like, thanks, Dad. That's literally all I needed to hear. It's so good. It's so good. But that is the privilege and the power of a pastor.
There's power in containment as well. And that's what he's doing for you. He's not talking. He's listening. And then he, may utter a few words that let you know he heard you. And that's containment.
For sure.
There's power in containment and being able to flesh those things out. Just like there is with God or with our spouse, doing that with our pastor as well can be a phenomenal thing.
Absolutely. And I've, even recently, in the last probably couple months, been dealing with a major situation, tough situation. Most pastors, they have never even dealt with this kind of stuff, and I'm living it right now. My first phone call was to my father, and man, he was just so wise, so calm, this and this, and it was just so good. But that's the privilege and that power of the position of the pastor. I'm a pastor, but I need a pastor. I need a man of God that I can, lean on, And so, number one, I want to talk to God. Number two, I want to talk to my spouse or my pastor, that kind of conglomeration. But number three,
Yeah.
if you're a pastor or a leader or even a CEO, you have a team of people around you who they are dying to be a part of your vision. And the way
That's
that you
good.
let people be a part of your vision is not just telling them what you saw, but it is also allowing them to be a part of the decision-making process and being a
That's
part
really
of what's
good.
going on in the
Helps them
outside
feel
of just the, yes,
it helps them feel like they have a seat at the table, helps them feel accepted. It draws them in a way like no other when you involve them in those vulnerable parts. And it takes vulnerability to be able to say, hey, I'm not sure exactly where I need to go here. Can you guys chime in here and help me? Takes vulnerability.
absolutely. I've never felt more close to my team than in moments like that when I say, hey, this is a tough moment. And, I don't really know the right answer here. I just want to get the room's feel. Like, what do you guys feel? There's no wrong answers. There's no wrong answers. You can't be wrong in this moment. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I tell my team that all the time. Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Like, you can come in my office and chew me out. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm a grown man. I'm ex-military. I've been chewed out way worse by a lot higher ranking people. So trust me, like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Here's how you will hurt my feelings is if we have this meeting, you keep your mouth closed and then you go talk to someone else afterwards and you have the meeting after the meeting. That'll hurt me.
Yeah.
But you can come look me dead in my face and tell me I'm a piece of trash.
That's called passive aggressive.
That's exactly what that is.
And that will erode teams and relationships quicker than anything else is passive aggressive behavior.
Absolutely. And, outside of my staff and my team, I also have a board. And this board that I have here at the church, they are all elders and they're great men. They're not ministers. They're not, what me and you would consider men of God, but they are men of God. And I know that when things are getting tight and I got to make a decision and it's not easy, I can call on these elders, set up a meeting with them, and they will just be my backbone. They'll give me the words I need. I continually tell them, don't sugarcoat it for me. Don't give me what I want. Don't say yes all the time. Please challenge me, challenge my thought process. If I tell you I don't want to be challenged, challenge me anyway. Hold my feet to the fire because I don't believe there's any way that I can get from where we are to the vision that I saw God give me without having a team of people who will test me and challenge my belief system and challenge my decision making. Hey, before we do that, let's think about this. There's 6 brains in that room, and I guarantee you somebody's thinking about something that I'm not thinking about.
Yeah.
And if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. That's not your room.
Well, and not only that, we've got to start moving towards a close here. We're getting close to an hour, but this has been so good. When I think about effective leaders, I think about people who effectively delegate. If I'm the smartest guy in the room, and everybody is looking to me, it's going to be hard to delegate authority, to delegate tasks, to delegate those things and effectively grow an organization. And so how do we work this into our culture, Cortt, to be able to have good decision makers, not only for me to be a good decision maker, but to work that into our culture so that we can continue to scale as a team, as a congregation, an organization? How can we work that into and cultivate that into our culture?
Well, I think it takes intentionality and willingness and trust. I would say to any leader watching or listening, when me and Ryan were talking about these moments of, letting people challenge you, ask the hard question. If that made you like nervous and it makes you sweat a little bit, you probably need to reevaluate your team. Because if you're not comfortable with your team not agreeing with you, like you're probably not going to move much further than where you currently are. I hope you like it, because that's where you're going to be. You have to be intentional about this. You have to develop trust. And if this is something that's most of us struggle with this thing because of one simple word, and that is ego. And ego is only one letter away from being egg, which represents the fragility of who we are. Our ego, we're fragile. Our ego is fragile. And it would destroy some of us for someone to say, yo, I don't like that. I think that's a bad idea because of this, this, and this. I always, hey, man, be respectful in your comments, but man, please tell me what you think. Because if you tell me what you think and we can have a little dialogue back and forth, maybe even, as Patrick Linsoni would call it, unfiltered dialogue in the 5 dysfunctions of a team. That unfiltered dialogue, it's so important for us to hash out. Hey, let's hash this out. Let's talk about this. And if I can't be challenged, I think this is probably a little more of personal work, Ryan, than it is teamwork. And what I mean by that is
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Leaders have to make this adjustment internally. I need to be able to let people challenge me. I need to be able to let people, hear my thoughts and say, I don't know. Was it Simon Sinek in the book Leaders Eat Last? I think in that book he talks about speaking last, like be the last one to speak in the meeting. And I try to. I don't always do that, but I really try. Like if we got something that we're trying to, I just start by saying, "Hey, what do you guys think?" I want to hear what you have to say, because if I speak first, I've already kind of diluted the waters. No one wants to challenge what I said.
Exactly. I like to say, I like to encourage people to stay curious longer.
I like that. I like that.
When you're in a meeting as a leader, because like you said, when a leader speaks, a lot of times that, people will sort of bow to what they want. And so if a leader can learn to stay curious longer and just ask questions of curiosity to their team, it'll sort of draw even the best out of people and out of individuals in that room.
Yeah. Well, I have a staff meeting every Wednesday. And we start the staff meeting by affirmations. And we go around the table, and it's about 10 or 12 of us. We go around the table and we just start by gratitude. Something good happened. We just start with gratitude. But we end every one of those meetings with unfiltered dialogue. And some Wednesdays it's easy. It's like, oh, everybody's good. We move on. But sometimes it's like, hey, I don't like this that we're doing, and someone made me feel some kind of way. This was my role. And then, I found out later that so-and-so had did it. And then it kind of made me feel a certain way. Those moments, they unite us. That unfiltered dialogue time of our meetings are some of the best decision-making moments, because what you hear and what you need to make good decisions is honesty, truth and honesty. And you really get that in unfiltered dialogue. You get what people are really thinking, how they really feel, not like an animated version of what's going to keep you happy, what's going to make me look good, or what's going to continue to keep my role in this team. My desire to keep you on my team is your ability to challenge me every once in a while and let me know that you're thinking as well, and that you're a leader who deserves to be at this table, and not just a follower who I can say jump and you'll say how high. Now, I know that may seem crazy to somebody because, we have this context of, I'm the man of God and whatever I say goes. But here's the deal. And this changed my life. And I know we got time. We're running out of time. But let me just say this one thing. And I think this is something that I've been telling everybody about this, because I think it plays into this moment. I am not the coach of my team. And that changes the entire dynamic of what I think about myself as a pastor. I'm not the coach of this church. I'm not. Because the coach put on a suit and stands on the sideline and watches everybody play. And that's not what I do. I'm not the coach of my team. I'm not the coach of my church. I'm actually a player. Now, I may be the captain of the team. Yes, I'll give myself that. But I'm putting up shots too. I'm invested in this. I'm working. Yeah. I will clean tables or I will preach a sermon. It doesn't matter to me. Wherever I get in, I fit in. God is my coach, and his playbook has always been the Bible. And if I need to be reminded of a play, it's in that book. It's in there somewhere. And if I can't get the play directly from the sheets, then I need to talk to the coach and say, hey, what should we do in this moment? But a lot of pastors and a lot of leaders, and I'm not trying to condemn anybody, please hear my heart. A lot of pastors that I've met, they really feel like they're the coach. That they're, I'm just telling everybody what to do, do what I say, and, get over here and do that, put up that shot, do this. And what it does, it disconnects the players from the team. It disconnects the players.
Yeah.
I'm on the court with you. And if I'm the coach, then I don't really get invited to the after party, do I? And if I'm the coach, then I don't really, my level of celebration is different than your level of, I celebrate, but I celebrate with the guys in the suits. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of churches like that, where it's like, we have a different set of people that we hang around. And I hang out around with the guys in the suits, and you hang around with the players. And there's such a disconnect in the kingdom of God between the pulpit and the pew. But when you have that camaraderie and you have that, everybody feels like you're part of the team, it endears you to them. And they don't mind coming to tell you what they felt like you did wrong so that you can be better.
Well, it's what I'm hearing in your voice, Cortt, is relationship. I mean, when we move towards building more productive relationships in our ministry and our leadership, it creates a culture of a whole lot of good things, including decision making.
Yeah.
But delegation, authenticity, vulnerability. When we're building more productive relationships, we're going to see a lot of positive fruit in our lives, and we're going to build and grow our organizations, right?
Absolutely.
So, I want to ask you one last question, but I just want to check in with you. Anything else on anything we've talked about, or decision making, or anything that you want to touch on that before I move into my last question that's unrelated really to this?
I don't really have anything other than just to, for leaders that may be listening to this and this stuff kind of maybe seems a little foreign to you, or maybe it's a tough reach for you, and you're thinking about your team and whatever. I would say probably consider doing a little bit of self work before you consider doing teamwork.
Yeah,
get yourself where you need to be, and then the other stuff will come a little naturally. That's it.
Personal growth is critical for all of us.
Absolutely.
Last question, and it can be related to this topic. It doesn't have to be, but I'm just curious, what advice would you give to young leaders that may be listening to this podcast who are just sort of starting their journey in ministry? What advice would you give them?
The first thing I would say is develop a relationship with God more than the ministry. At a very young age, it's very easy to get so caught up in the ministry and the position and the place and the licensing or whatever that you kind of, lose that relationship with God on the way. So I would just say, number one, fight for your personal relationship with God. Number two, I would say, be a reader. Read a lot. Listen to books. If you struggle to read a page, get Audible. It's cheap. It's less than $20 a month. Get it. Get a book every month. Read it. Make some notes. If you're not the leader right now and you are just in leadership role under several leaders, then I would say one of the number one books you need to read is the 360-degree leader by John Maxwell really helped me when I was with my dad, not being really the guy, but seeing how I could be effective from any place within, the entire movement. I could be influential in those places. I think that's good. Read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I always say that.
Yes.
Just read it. When you get done reading it, just start over and just read it. I've been reading it every year for a little over 20 years now. And sometimes I read it twice a year. And for young leaders, your self-development is so powerful because other people are going to be, as you grow in ministry and your calling, other people are going to be depending on you. And you got to make sure that your self-foundation is really solid, because the stacking. One thing that I really had to do when I moved here to Atlanta and started the church was really work on myself, really put in the time, answering tough questions about myself, looking at myself in the mirror, being very honest, reading books that hurt my feelings, like Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. Reading books that, stab you in the heart, like Five Dysfunctions of a Team, like by Patrick Lencioni, The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. Books that if you are honest when you read those books, you have to check yourself. And that, I think for young leaders, that's one of the greatest things you can do for everybody who you will potentially lead in the future, is how you lead yourself now. And the time you put in every week, every day, every month to put into yourself, to add value to your own mind, to your own level of understanding, and get you some good mentors, talk to people who are doing what you want to do, and ask them, hey, how did you get here? What are some advice you can give me, whatever it may be. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to approach. I think that there's a generation in my age group. I'm 45, and there's a really good generation of guys like me who really love to pour into younger guys in their 20s, teens, and 30s. And we're not afraid to tell you our mistakes, our failures, our wins. We'll tell you anything. We'll share with you what we can. Take advantage of that if you have the ability to take advantage of that. And ultimately, what I would speak to young leaders, in finalizing with this, is learn to develop the skill of not taking it personal. Yeah, it's not personal. And I think that's going to help you. As a matter of fact, if you want to know more about that, then go and maybe on a podcast somewhere, or maybe on YouTube as well. It's called David's Greatest Skill. You can listen to that message, or that it's really just a lesson, just a talk. But I would encourage every young leader to develop that skill of not taking it personal, because you're going to feel like it is, but it's not.
Yeah. Tremendous advice. Tremendous advice. I hope every young leader that may be listening to this podcast is taking notes and really taking those things to heart, because every one of them are true. So, Cortt, if people want to connect with you online in some way in the future, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm really on Instagram, and that's it. So it's at Cortt Chavis. I have a Twitter handle, but I hardly ever do anything on that. I have Facebook, but I rarely do anything on that. So really, at Cortt Chavis on Instagram is the biggest place that I interact or whatever. And probably in 2025, I will have some more kind of revamping my YouTube channel. Probably going to start a personal podcast myself, but also if you want to hear any of my messages, any of my preaching, teaching on Wednesday nights, go to the Truth Chapel podcast. It's just the messages, just the services. So, if you ever want to hear the preaching or even just Bible study time, all that's on the Truth Chapel podcast.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes to your Instagram and to your podcast, to your church podcast. So, well, thank you so much, Cortt, for giving us your time. I greatly appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
And so this concludes our show today. My name is Ryan Franklin. Thank you so much for joining us on the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.